Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio. We proudly provide world-class entertainment, education, hope, and inspiration. And our goal is to leave you with a smile on your face. I'm Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck, and I am so honored to be here for the Listening Mentor Show. I'm really an advocate of elevated listening for a number of reasons, which we'll get into during the show. Joining me is an expert listener. She listens for a living. Say that 10 times, listens for a living. She also helps people bust their stress, and she's known as the Harley Street Stress Expert. She's located in the United Kingdom. Let's welcome our expert therapist in-house at USA Global TV and Radio, Caroline.heward. Hello.
Woo! It's always a lovely introduction from you, Dr. Jacalyn. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So nice to see your beautiful smiling face today. How's it over there in the UK?
Well, it's still summer, but it's not quite that warm, so I'm not dripping.
And we've got a steam bath over here. It's 100 degrees with humidity. So it's crazy. But I'm glad that it's not that hot because of the air conditioning situation over there. So it's good to be cool and collected. Before we get into our topic today, which is empathetic listening, understanding others through compassion, I want to have you share how much of the work that you do, because you do a number of things, you're highly educated, you've got certificates that would cover multiple walls. How much of what you do is based on a foundation of being an excellent expert listener?
All of it. Absolutely all of it. Because if I'm not listening, then I can't understand what the other person needs, what their issues are. So I have to hear actively everything they're saying. And sometimes I actually tell them to repeat what they've said if I've not quite heard it, if they've mumbled or said it quickly, because it's so important that I hear their language and every word that they say and their tonality. And so I now frequently wear a headset so I can absolutely hear everything that they're saying.
Fabulous. And as I mentioned, you are an expert listener. You have listened to me blither on and on many times. So thank you for that. On Thursday, it's actually 1 year ago since my mother passed away. And you were definitely there for me many, many times when I was in a dark place. So thank you. And I encourage anyone else out there who is going through some trying times and feels that they are not being heard, reach out to Caroline. She will help you in many, many ways. So, Caroline, today, something I wanted to talk about, because our goal is to educate people. I want to talk about when we are playing the role of a listener, whether it's personally or professionally. When is it appropriate to ask what I'm going to say busybody questions that are just information that we really want to know that probably has nothing to do with what the person's sharing? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a really good question. At the same time, I think that, sometimes we want to know things without really needing to know, and that's probably because we are interested. And it's important when somebody comes with a bigger problem that we allow them to share it in their way. And if we do need that extra information, then to ask it at the appropriate times. But to be nosy and, in your words, the busybody questions, I feel that it's important to choose your times. And if the person is struggling with something, that's not the best time.
Agree with you. I think it's tempting at times for people to ask a question that literally has nothing to do with what the person's saying, because people start getting in their own head, right? You're sharing a story and I'm either listening at an elevated level where I'm not thinking about anything else, or you're saying something and now it prompts me to think something else. And I'm thinking, gee, I'd really like to ask her about this or that, which has nothing to do with anything except me wanting to know. So if we are being empathetic, we're being compassionate, does that mean, in your area of expertise, that we have removed any emotional ties to what the person is saying to us?
It's the exact opposite. What we are removing is our inner dialogue. We are removing that inner conversation that we have, our inner questions, and being fully present with the other person and absolutely listening from an emotional place rather than from being in the head and in a thinking place. Because while we're thinking and working out what we think about something that they've said, or while we're trying to work out our next question, we're absolutely not listening. And so it is important to create a much greater connection by being empathetic with that person, by remaining in eye contact and also with that listening ear. And it's not just about the fact that we're saying nothing, it's about the fact that we're thinking nothing.
Thinking nothing, important. Okay, so I'm going to dive into this a little bit. And I think I've shared this before, but I'm going to share it again. When I first started coaching, doing life coaching, someone came to me and booked a session. And the person was really upset about their weight. And the person's doctor had told the person that if you don't do this, that, or the other, this or that might happen to you because your numbers are off the chart, etc. And I started crying. And I couldn't stop myself. And I was so mad at myself because I thought, this person is not paying for me to be crying. They're paying for me to be listening. So how do we tap into being compassionate and empathetic, but having some decorum and level of restraint so that we don't personally get involved with what the person's saying? Or do you think we should be personally involved?
Well, that's the big question in terms of being empathetic. It doesn't help, and at the same time, it does show the other person, if you are a little emotional, that they're reaching you and they're being heard. So I feel from the professional perspective that it's important to be empathetic by being there, understanding, and paraphrasing, summarizing, so that they feel that they're being understood, they feel that they're being heard. And when you are paraphrasing or summarizing what they've said, or drawing some conclusions from what they've said, that allows them to feel that intensity of the empathy that you're showing them. And when you are listening actively and with empathy, there is no space really for you to kind of get your two big wellies and get in there and start getting really emotional. And so when you are in that place of being, I would call it advanced counseling skills, that when you're paraphrasing, summarizing, and also using silences to allow the person to expand how they're feeling and the story that they want to tell and where they're at with that particular thing that they're describing and what situation is that they're describing. When you give that silence, that also allows them to go deeper. And when you're actively listening, you're then there for the client. You're not there for yourself. And you could actually, if you want to create a greater space of empathy, you could, if it feels right and appropriate, share a little bit of something that's personal to you that is similar, or allows them to feel that you do connect because something similar has happened to you, or you have an appreciation of what they've been experiencing because you have a similar story. And it's really important to be careful about how much personal information that you give to them. And at the same time, I've found that in giving a little bit, it actually draws them further in, and they feel an empathic connection with you because they know that you fully appreciate what they're going through.
So many fabulous points that you just mentioned there. I want to drill down on a couple of them. The first is, if you are in a personal situation with someone, you have a relationship with this person, and maybe you've taken our course, The Power of Listening, and you're an elevated listener, or you're someone who studied listening, or you were educated on it, and you listen to what the other person has to say, and then you ask permission, at least that's what I learned in coaching, may I share a story with you? How long do you wait before asking that? And I'll explain why, because this has happened to me. I'll be sharing something, and then there's no validation from the other person that they heard anything I said. They immediately went into their story. And then I'm still here going, yeah, I don't know if you even heard. I mean, I understand you're sharing something that's similar, but you didn't acknowledge anything I had to say. How does that work?
Well, I usually use the phrase, does what I've just shared with you resonate with you? Does that give you, does what I've just shared with you have any relevance to the experience that you've had? So I am actually looking for some confirmation, some kind of endorsement that they have heard what I've shared and that it is similar to what they've experienced.
And just to continue on that, when they say yes or no, or whatever the case is, how do you then segue back to the person? Let me give you an example. And this is one we have a role play on. Caroline, I'm so excited. I just got engaged. I was in Paris. And then you say, oh, I remember when I was in Paris and I got it. And then I'm still there in Paris with this engagement that you really haven't even addressed. And now we're on to your engagement. When does it come back to me, if at all? Well, by the way, neither one of us are engaged. Just putting that out there for people.
Good thinking. It's important to allow the person to say what they need to say. And when you feel it's appropriate, when there's a space to share, and it isn't about jumping in and explaining your story, that sometimes you can feel, and it's another elevated listening skill, you like have an inner knowing or an intuitive feeling that there's something that's similar. And it's not a conversation analytical thing. It's like sort of an elevated skill of an inner knowing or a sort of a feeling. And then you can say, oh, yes, I absolutely really appreciate what you're describing because I had a similar experience. Would you mind if I shared it with you? And that is sometimes, if there was a difficulty in that situation that they described, then it allows them a segue to bring up what was difficult about it. Sometimes people find it very difficult to share everything that's been challenging in a quick succession of the one session. And so if you can lean in and then share a little bit of your own, sometimes, especially if you have those higher level of sensory acuity skills, that you can segue in to almost say what they fill in the gaps of what they haven't said, getting an acknowledgement that there is something that is addressing something that's been going on for them too.
And you and I are both trained listeners. Majority of people, I'm going to say, probably are looking for some additional education. By the way, we have Gaffa Brumley Priestley watching live. Hello, nice to have you with us. So for the person who doesn't have training like what we have, what I've been told in classes that I've taught is person says, yes, I'm listening. I'm listening to what you have to say. And then they secretly, silently are judging everything that you have to say, but they're under control. They're not saying anything about it. And then once you finish what you have to say, they literally attack you. They barrage you with all these things because they've judged what you've said. So they gave the impression that they were going to be listening fully and giving you a gift of that listening, and it turned into something that caused an argument.
You have to choose the people you share with. And I know that sounds, I'm smiling, almost laughing, and at the same time, we know those people that we can trust or not trust, or we learn as we go through life who we can share something with and who's going to jump straight in and share their judgments about what you are saying. So it's important to choose your confidant wisely and to keep close to your chest until you feel safe. That's the important thing, for you to feel that it's comfortable for you to share. And the way I would say that would work is if they share things with you and you share a non-judgment with them, sometimes, especially if it's the right confidant, then you can in turn share things with them and expect the same behavior back. I do have a philosophy on that, and that is that to treat others as we would like to be treated ourselves. And so when we are respectful of people's confidences and not stepping into a place of judgment, I feel that when you are that type of person, then it comes back the other way. But if you are stepping into a place of judgment, then expect that same vibrational energy from other people. And so it is a bit of a virtuous way to live. And I have been caught out before now. And at the same time, I feel that to go into a place of trust in each conversation is important. But choose the people wisely that you choose to share a big confidence, and make sure that they are trustworthy, and they almost have to earn your trust for those deeper confidences.
That is a key takeaway from the program today. I love it. To make sure that the people you share with, you can trust and that they're not going to judge you. So I'll share a quick story, but not that long ago. I'm not going to say how long ago, but not that long ago, I was asked how I was doing. And I said, I'm happy to share. However, I would appreciate it if you do not make any comments or try to solve what you perceive to be as problems. Are you willing to agree to that? And the person said yes. And I couldn't even get through what I was about to talk about. And the person started giving solutions. And I said, I'm sorry. First of all, you interrupted me. And second of all, you said you were going to listen. Well, I think you're making a big mistake. And so I immediately thought, okay, I'm not going to go down this path. But this is what happens in relationships where you've known someone for a long time. There are these patterns of behavior. So let's say when you're talking about choose your confidant wisely, let's say a person's married or they're in a long-term relationship, and that person is supposed to be the one they can speak to. What if you're working on yourself, but the other person's still where they are? Do you continue to reach out to them, or do you turn to someone else?
You are asking some very deep and meaningful questions here tonight. It depends on the situation, and I'm going to caveat it that way. It depends on what it is that's come up for you. Because sometimes it's easier to speak to somebody outside of the relationship because they will have an external perspective, and then to go inside the relationship and then speak to your partner. I feel that sometimes you can be so close to something that it's difficult for each person in that relationship to see the other person's perspective. And so in the case of a relationship, an intimate relationship, or indeed a friendship that's really close, I feel that it's important to set some ground rules in terms of being able to share what you're thinking and feeling without judgment, and to actually share with them what you feel from a place of honesty, and finding that the right time is really important to have that conversation. Because if it is bringing up difficulties within that relationship, it's important that to understand that there are two sides to every perspective. There's theirs, yours, and then there's a third one, the truth. And we will always be seeing things from our own filters, from our own experiences. And so my invitation in this reality of being so close into a situation in a relationship is to listen to each other's perspective, and then find in the middle some common ground to hear from each other's perspective in a way to move forward and find some resolution. But we will always view things from our own filters and from our own map of the world. And so that's important to understand, because what you see might not be what the other person sees. And so they may not see that there's a problem, whereas you see there's a problem. And if you don't voice what you're feeling and thinking about a situation, they may never know.
That's so true. And by the way, I want to let our audience know that Caroline has no idea what I'm going to ask her. We have had no preparation whatsoever. So, and I don't even know what I'm going to ask her. I'm just following the conversation. So great job, Caroline. So what's coming up for me in terms of providing education on this topic is, where does the term validation come into play? And I'll give an example. So many times people will have a disagreement because one person's sharing something about themselves, and then we switch it to having to prove ourselves, or you're right and I'm wrong, or I'm right and you're wrong. So let's say there's a problem in the relationship, and one person is expressing, I feel this when you do that, or I've been unhappy because, and then the other person turns it around and goes, it's all your fault. That's why we're in this situation. Because people no longer listen. They go on the attack mode because they feel that they're not validated and the contributions they've made aren't valid. So where does the role of validation sit in terms of being a compassionate listener?
Well, exactly from the perspective of what you've just shared, that if you are in a retaliation perspective and in a retaliation of sharing, you're not compassionately listening, and you're not being an empathic listener. And so that is where you're in the defense. And we start to share and we start to be defensive when we're in fear of a situation, when we're in fear of what the other person thinks or feels. And then we're guarded and we're not being empathic because we're in fear of being judged, we're in fear of being criticized. And when you're in fear of what's coming up, there's no way that you can be empathic or compassionate in your communication. And so it's important to understand both sides. And if you are in this place of retaliation or denial, or even a place of manipulation, so one person's manipulating because they have their own agenda, there is no way that there is an empathic communication of listening and being heard. And so if you are exhibiting any of those traits, then there's no way that you can be compassionate as a listener or as a giver of the communication.
So, Caroline, along those lines, does that mean that the relationship is over, or that the relationship is headed for a parting of the ways?
Well, this is where you either agree to disagree. So this is the compromise. I appreciate your perspective on this, and my perspective is different. So let's agree to disagree. And this is where you're both right from your own perspectives. When you agree to disagree, then there is nowhere to go in terms of this fear manipulation. And then you go forward from that place of agreeing to disagree on that particular topic. And it could be that in moving forward from that place, that you can work through. And some people do. Some people have been in relationships. I've known of couples that have been married for like 40, 50 and 60 years. And I'm in awe of the fact that they can be together for that long. And when I ask them, how do you stay together for that long? What's the secret of it? How have you done that? And the secret is that there's a lot of compromise. There is a lot of understanding. There is a lot of listening. There is a lot of respectful communication. And there's a lot of appreciation of the other person's viewpoint, and appreciating that you're not always going to agree in terms of how you move forward. And so this is where you work in the relationship. But many times, certainly for younger people, that divorce was so easy to happen that it was very quick, whereas in the older generations it was much harder to get a divorce, and so people just stayed together and worked it out. And in our newer generations, our younger generations, it's just much easier to say it's not working, and they go off and have affairs and see other people, and then they just stop working in the marriage. And I feel that that's because it's become much more secondary to stay together and work it out and just to move on. But my insight to share with that is, if there's something that's coming up within a relationship that's not working, you are part of that bit that's not working. And if you can't resolve it within that particular relationship, it will come up in future relationships, or indeed future friendships, or friendships with colleagues. And so if there's something that you're blaming somebody for, it is important to look inside to see where that is within you, to resolve what's within you before you go looking for a new partner, because each person will bring up undealt with issues within ourselves, so that we explore to grow through that change and that wisdom.
I agree 100%. Very well said. Now, to the point that you just made, let's say you have, and we're giving hypotheticals, by the way, because I'm not in a relationship. I don't think you're in a relationship. So we're just questions, for people to think about. So if you are in a long-term relationship with someone and it's not working, it hasn't been working, and you decide to do some work on yourself, maybe you get a mentor, a coach, a therapist, work with someone like yourself, and all of a sudden, as a result of you doing the work, you might see things you hadn't seen before, which now ultimately, if the other partner is not willing to do the work, you might say, wait a minute, I am now waking up and I see that I was doing this. You're also doing that. You don't want to work on it. So hasta la vigo, baby.
Sometimes when we clear up our own stuff of what's not working, and I've done that over many years. I started working in personal self-development in 1992, but more effectively as a therapist since 2000. And in that space since 1992, I evolved very much professionally and personally because I was exploring what I could and couldn't do, and I was exploring those conversations with different people and doing things that I wouldn't have had normally access to do in my normal working day when I started doing my personal self-development work. And that was all voluntary and unpaid to begin with. And then after my father passed away, I started doing therapy, personal self-development work, and also spiritual involvement. And I would say that when you clear up your stuff or the thing that you're reacting and responding to, and the thing that's bothering you, what happens is it actually clears in consciousness whatever it is that you were putting out there. And sometimes in you doing that clearing up of yourself, it can clear up a situation with a person or a relationship that wasn't working, and it can make it wonderful and it can make it really bountiful. And sometimes it can move the other way, where you have grown and evolved and changed and the other person hasn't come with you. So it can go both ways. And I know of a number of very, very evolved couples that are doing a lot of work on themselves and doing work together, who have been incredibly close as a couple, and then they've split up because they've evolved and gone their separate ways. So there is no right or wrong in this. And I always consider the cliche, water off a duck's back. If you are responding and reacting, that response and reaction is yours. So there's something in you that's undealt with. If you are not responding and reacting to the other person, and what I mean by that is you're not getting all upset or emotional or reacting in a negative way, and I call that water off a duck's back. So they're expressing something and you're listening, but you're not giving a reaction to it. Then whatever it is that's coming up is their stuff. And that's how you can work out what's yours, what's theirs, and what needs working on.
I love that, Caroline. Will you repeat that? I think that's really important.
Which bit?
The bit about if you are not reacting.
Yeah. Well, if you're not reacting to it, so I call that water off a duck's back. So have you heard that expression? Is that an expression? Yeah, you have. Yes. So when somebody's kind of bawling and being really emotional and really, sort of, you did this and you did that and I'm not happy, and they're really kind of going at you, and you're listening, you're going, well, what's that all about? And you're not reacting to it. You're not saying, hey, hang on a minute, and getting defensive. When you're not doing any of those things, then you're there hearing everything like it's all being barraged at you, when you're not in a place of reacting to anything or responding to it. You are listening. And so in that place, you are in observation, and you're not taking it on because it's not your stuff.
That's so powerful, Caroline. I have to say, there have been times in my life when the other person was just screaming and yelling, and then the screaming turned into crying. When a person gets so they're crying, you don't know, are you angry, are you sad, what are you? And I would just sit there and I think to myself, I feel sad that you are losing complete and total control of yourself, because obviously there are other issues that are coming up. But at that point in time, unless I would think you're a therapist or you've been asked about it, you can't say, do you realize that you are completely out of your mind, like judging someone by name calling or labeling? So what is the best way if you are in a relationship with someone and they are losing it and you're water off a duck's back? What do you say to the person as they're having the meltdown?
You don't. You listen.
For how long?
And you just allow them the space to express, because sometimes they just have to, that we have an expression in England, get it off your chest. I don't know whether that's the same in the UK. Some people just have to just get it all out, to say everything. And we say, get it off your chest. Have you got all that off your chest? And sometimes when I was in my relationship and we were in the place of it wasn't working, I would say, is that it? And then they would go into another barrage of all the things.
And you're like, it's been 5 hours already. Like, when do you say that's it?
Well, but when you said, and I don't know whether that's coy or cheeky, but I want to know when we were going to end this barrage of, somebody kind of having a go at me. So I say, is that it? Is there any more? And so then they would come out with the next barrage. And then when you are not reacting and responding, they run out of steam. They've said it all. It's all off their chest.
What comes after that then? Sadness, crying?
They become calm. They become calm. They feel not judged. They've been listened to. Sometimes they just have to say it. They just need to get it out, to voice it. And then once they have, it's because that's all been running around in their head. And once it's out, it's off their chest and they feel lighter, better, easier. Have you ever been with somebody that's like sort of given you 4 barrels? They've just given you everything. And you've stood there, you've sat there with them and you've listened. You've not judged. You've not said anything. You've just been there for them. And then at the end of it, they say, oh, I don't know what that was. I just feel so much better now. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being there.
Yes. So I want to give an example, which I've given before, but I think it makes sense and it's no longer important that I hide what it was. But I was in a professional situation as a fitness trainer, and the manager wanted to speak to me at some point after the class. She took the class and she literally backed me into a wall, screaming and yelling because the class that I was teaching was not the same way that she taught the class. And I literally ended up from over here with my back against the wall in a corner, and she just kept going and going. And I said to her, is there more? And there was more. And after she finished, she said, you don't know how hard that was for me. And I'm thinking, really hard is I didn't say anything. And she said, I feel a lot better. And I said, great. I'm glad that you're able to share, and I'm glad you're able to feel better. And when I left and got in my car, I cried. And the reason I cried was I felt like, and this is why I'm bringing it up, I felt like I was abused. I felt like I was bullied. I felt like there was no decorum or respect. And that is what I think happens in relationships when relationships are troubled, or it's the same pattern going over and over again, that one party is completely unloading on the other party and the other party learns to just take it. But by taking it, even though if you say to yourself, well, maybe some of that's correct, it's the way that it's delivered to you that I think, I'm just using myself, for example, I would never want to work for that person again. I would never want to socialize with that person. In fact, I don't want that person following me on any social media. So that's because I feel like I was abused. Whether the information was correct or it wasn't correct, I don't think it was delivered in a way that was compassionate and empathetic. And many times in relationships, that's how one party treats the other. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I call that baggage. That's what I would call that they've offloaded their baggage onto you. And we all have a certain amount of baggage that we're carrying with us unless we've done some work. And even when you've done some work, you can't get to your adult age without having stuff that hasn't worked out for you. And so we become that becomes part of our lives and part of our baggage. And if that's your baggage and you're throwing that, verbally vomiting that over someone, and they didn't ask for it, that's their stuff. And it depends, and then you make a choice. It depends on whether you want to be working with them or be in that relationship with them or not, because that is something that they have to work through. And if you are being affected by it, you have a choice of whether you stay or whether you leave. And so it's all about choice. And we all have stuff that's happened in our lives that has been challenging and being difficult. And it really just depends on how we manage that in terms of our emotional intelligence and how much we are respectful of others. Sometimes we can be so respectful and so demeaning that we don't become ourselves and we're not expressing from our true self. And so I feel from that place, it's important to be respectful of yourself in terms of your boundaries and communicate to others where your boundaries are. Because if your boundaries are very loose and people are overstepping them, this is where you can tighten your boundaries so that other people, because when you're respectful of your own boundaries, other people will be respectful of yours too.
You know, I love you. We could talk about this for endless hours. We have a show after this, but I do have one more question. And the question I think you can relate to, probably I can relate to, and probably other people can relate to it as well. I've definitely been in dysfunctional relationships. I'm raising my hand now and saying yes. And I was a part of it because I allowed it to happen. I didn't have any boundaries. I didn't speak up for myself. But what I think is important also for other people, because there are people out there right now who are listening live or on the replay and they're shaking their head and they're saying, that's what I got going on here. But they either feel so beaten down so that their self-esteem is at a very low point in time, or maybe their children, or maybe there's grandchildren, there's properties, there's this, there's that, and they feel so guilty to do anything. And they're left in that position where their life just feels overwhelmingly sad. What advice do you have? What is the first step that someone in that position can do?
To recognize that they're not happy, to make a decision, a choice of whether they stay or whether they leave the situation. And that is something that's an internal experience of working out whether it's good to stay there, because sometimes people stay in those kind of situations because they don't know anything else, or they've been in that relationship for a long time and don't know what it would be like to not be in that relationship. So they stay, and they stay in what is an abusive relationship that's non-respectful. And so it's quite hard. And I have total empathy for anyone that stays in a relationship that's very abusive, whether it's emotional, mental, physical, or sexual. It's something that is going on because there are a lot of very manipulative people in the world, both men and women. And there are some very manipulative women too in relationships because they're working in their masculine energy. So this isn't just saying men, this is saying both men and women can be highly manipulative. And it's important to make a decision about what you want to experience. And my analogy for this, especially as I've lost very, very close friends and very good friends, and I've lost a brother and my dad, is that I absolutely appreciate we are here for a very short time on this earth plane. And so I feel that it's important to live rather than to suffer in your lifetime. And even though we have enough going on with things that are going on in the world, to make a choice of how we choose to live in our relationships or not. Sometimes it's better to be in a space on our own before and heal before we decide to go into a new relationship. So this is a very compassionate response, that it's okay to say, no, this is not okay. And it's also okay to not be okay.
In a time when there are so many people who have mental health concerns and people are just feeling so down about themselves, you are spot on, as always. Fantastic direction and advice that you've given today. So friends watching, friends listening, because now we also have podcasts as well as our live broadcast, Please do not suffer alone. Please do not think that you are not worthy, that you don't deserve to be happy, all these negative emotions that come up. Caroline is here to help you. She is an expert. She has helped me many times, and I encourage you to reach out to her. Caroline, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you, and who is a good client for you?
Thank you, Dr. Jacalyn. You can reach me if you email me on nomorestress@live.co.uk, or call me if you're international, +44. If you're local in England, 07523 120 189. The kind of client that I can help is the one that's reached a point that they want to do something about what's not working. So if you have a difficult relationship, as we've been talking about relationships, and you want to work through, I work with all sorts of different methodologies. I also work with chakra psychology and root cause therapy, identifying the root cause of why the experiences that you're experiencing are repeating, because it might be not just one relationship, it might be other relationships, and it might be that you're starting to think that every man or woman is the same, and there's something within you that we can address and change. I'm also a behaviorist, and so behaviors are really easy to change when you know what's not working. And if you have any physical aches and pains, if you have any anxiety, stress, or any depression where you're not sleeping and your mind is constantly going, please reach out, because I can help you break through the patterns that are causing your stress, anxiety, depression, or your relationship issues. And I look forward to helping you bust your stress.
Thank you, Caroline. I always feel energized after we have our shows together. And by the way, yesterday's show, A Woman's Prerogative, tons of views, excellent comments. So thank you again for being part of this platform in the biggest way. You're also one of our expert presenters on Talking Heads, which will be back. Is it next week?
It'll be in 2 weeks' time.
2 weeks. Next week is a listening mentor?
It is, yes.
Okay. We'll be back with more incredible education, hope, and inspiration. So for now, thank you for being here, and we'll be back with our next show, which is Royal Breaking News. Yay! For now, we're going to go over to our sponsors, starting off with Mr. Philip Sykes and the British School of Excellence. Bye for now.
Bye-bye, everyone.
USA Global TV and Radio proudly presents our partner and sponsor, Mr. Philip Sykes and the British School of Excellence. Building confidence, changing lives. And now, proudly presenting the Polished Professional.
On a transformative journey with the British School of Excellence's comprehensive suite of masterclasses, crafted to elevate your professional and personal life. 8 outstanding modules will elevate you to the next level. Module 1, Exploring Life's Purpose, delves into the depths of self-discovery, guiding you to chart your unique path to fulfillment and success. Module 2, Mastering Professional Presence and Confidence. This masterclass is a deep dive into the art of self-assurance and commanding presence, which is essential for standing out in today's competitive landscape. Module 3, Learn the secrets of visual impact, how to curate a personal style that amplifies your professional brand. Module 4, Mastering Professional Etiquette and Communication Excellence, navigating the nuances of corporate interaction with grace and tact. Module 5, Elegance in Eloquence. We impart powerful techniques to captivate and persuade any audience with your oratory skills. Module 6, Unlock the potential of your emotional intelligence, EQ, and harness the ability to connect, empathize, and lead with emotional savvy. Module 7, Mastering DISC, building a gateway to understanding behavioral styles, fostering better personal and professional relationships. Module 8, Mastery in Dining Etiquette, building your confidence to perfect the subtleties of dining with finesse, enhancing your social savviness at any table. Step into the Polished Professional program where poise, elegance, and excellence aren't just taught, they're instilled for life. Join us to redefine your potential and polish your professional edge.
To learn more, go to thebritishschoolofexcellence.com. The British School of Excellence are investors in people. Let us invest in you.